Hey everyone, what's going on? So this podcast can be a little bit different. I'm not going to be interviewing anybody or diving into specific tactics or anything like that. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to share with you a keynote that I've been working on. And I think a lot of people need to hear this message right now because of all the stuff that's going on in the world. And it really reflects the challenges that I've been through over the past 3 years and what I've learned and how I'm trying to get through this and trying to deal with it just like everybody else. So after listening to this, I would absolutely love your feedback, direct feedback. So if you could email me at john@jbarrows.com, I'd really appreciate it. And again, that's John, John, at the letter J, B as in boy, ARROWS.com. And look, you can email me for anything moving forward here, any questions that you have, any feedback that you have. But for this one specifically, I'd love to hear if you enjoyed the message, if you got something out of it, and if you think other people need to hear it. So the title of it is Continuous Growth Through Challenging Times. And it focuses on what I've learned from talking to hundreds of executives and working with dozens of companies over the past few years, and also doing a lot of self-reflection on myself and my business. Because the last 3 or 4 years have been some of the most challenging and disruptive years I've ever been through, both personally and professionally. I mean, I don't know a single person out there who hasn't gone through something absolutely major in their life in the past few years here. And ever since COVID hit, it's like things have been on fast forward, for crying out loud. I mean, where something major used to happen every 3 or 4 or 5 years, now it seems like it's happening every week or almost every day, for crying out loud. But the good news is through all that, I've noticed there are certain people and certain companies that tend to continuously grow no matter how challenging it is. And so that's what the next 30 minutes or so is going to be all about. It's the three main pillars or characteristics of people and companies who seem to continuously grow even through these challenging times. And those three pillars are alignment, execution, and gratitude. So I'm going to unpack each one of these and share stories of what I've learned and how I've leveraged these in my own business and personal life to get me through some of the toughest times I've ever been through. And in order for me to tell this story right, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of context on this one and a little bit of background. Now, most of you know me, but for those of you who don't, I grew up here in Boston and went down to University of Maryland, drank my way through 4 years of college, got my degree in marketing because I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then, my first job was in DeWalt Power Tools. So it was a great entree into sales because it wasn't hardcore sales. It was more event marketing, but I got to drive around in a Dodge Ram pickup truck, giving away free tools to construction workers. It was pretty much the coolest thing I could have done out of school. Now, after that, I went to Xerox and sold copiers. And if you've ever sold copiers, man, I mean, talk about selling a commodity, right? I mean, 45 pages a minute over 42 pages a minute, but it scans the email. I mean, that's the definition of selling a commodity. So that's where I learned how to sell. I also learned relationship development and how to take rejection. And after that, I ended up joining a startup that a friend of mine had started, and it was outsourced IT services firm. And I came on board as the fourth person to run sales and marketing. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I took every training I could. I took Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, Spin, you name it, I was taking it. And I came across this company called Basho. And it was the first training that I took that I loved, because it wasn't this big theory about selling or this huge process I had to follow. It was, hey, here's how to send an email, send an email. Here's how to make a phone call, make a phone call. So I used Basho and all the techniques to actually help grow Thrive Up. And we ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row, and got us to about 85 employees and about 12 million in revenues. And then we sold off to Staples. So Staples came and bought us. And I spent about a year going through that integration, and come to find out, apparently I'm not a corporate guy. As you all know, I don't have much of a filter, and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position. A really nice way of firing me. And so I was looking for a job, and Basho came knocking and said, John, do you want to be a trainer? And my first answer to that was absolutely not, because the problem was up until that point in my career, the only type of sales trainers I had ever come across were either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. And if you've ever been through a sales training where you could just tell the trainer's never actually done what they're telling you what to do, I didn't want to be that guy. And they said, don't worry, John, you have to use these techniques to sell so you can train so you can get paid. I was like, all right, I like the whole practice what you preach thing, right? So I joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones. To make a very long story short, they screwed it all up and I took it over. So back in 2007 or 8 or something like that, new CEO came in, tanked the company, fired us all on the spot. And I scooped it up with Kensei Partners, with another business partner of mine. And then about 3 years after that, went off on my own with Jay Barrows. And things were going really good. I mean, I was traveling all over the world, training some of the coolest companies out there, right? Fastest growing. We got Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, HubSpot, you name it. I was training them and having a blast doing it. So we kind of grew the company. And I never really started a business because I wanted to build a company. I started one purely, mainly because I didn't want a boss, right? And the cool thing is after about 10 years of me grinding, being on the road and doing everything to drive revenue, we built a company with some incredible people doing some fantastic things, and things were going really well for us. And now, mind you, most of our stuff was on-site training. That's what we were doing, right? And people out there joining me doing some of that stuff, and then doing an all online community as well. So again, things were great. And COVID hit. And that was interesting because I legitimately watched 90% of my revenue disappear. I mean, we watched the dominoes fall. It was because we had sessions scheduled in APAC, EMEA, and the US. And we saw the APAC sessions canceling, then the EMEA ones, then the US ones. And overnight, 90% of our revenue disappeared. And so a little bit of a panic, obviously, but we ended up getting through it as an organization because we knew what our purpose was. We knew why we were here, which is to elevate the people in the profession of sales, and we knew they were hurting. And so we went out there, and instead of doing sales training, we did some motivational stuff. We give away as much stuff as we possibly could. And because from a value standpoint, family is top of our list, we ended up making sure instead of having everybody, go for a revenue goal when that hit, we flattened it out and said, all right, our main goal now is to make sure that everybody stays employed. And so with that family mentality and going out there and doing what we could, we actually did really well. I mean, we took a hit just like everybody else, right? 3 months or whatever, but then we started to really take off. And so 2020 was actually a great year for us as an organization. And for me personally, I mean, it was fantastic because I was finally off an airplane. I mean, for 10 years, I was a stay-at-home. I was stay-at-home. I wish I was a stay-at-home dad. I was a weekend dad. I mean, my daughter was born and I was I was there for her birth, but every single week I would leave on Monday, come home on Friday for 10 years of her life. And that wasn't easy. But and I'll talk about this a little bit later, I had this mentality of why I was doing this. And, thankfully I have a super supportive wife who also runs her own company, by the way. So she was juggling raising our daughter and her own business while I was traveling around the world. And so, things were going pretty decent. Now at the end of, at the end of 2020, we were still in quarantine. And I remember my wife, we live here in Boston, and she absolutely hates the winter, right? So I remember in December, I get this, if we're going to be in quarantine again, we are not staying in Boston for winter. So we're going to Aruba. And I was like, okay. I'm like, they got Wi-Fi? And she's like, yep. So I was like, all right, I'm in. So she goes and finds this killer Airbnb. It's like 6 bedrooms, pool outside, and nobody had been using it. So she calls the guy up to negotiate with him, ends up getting it for more than half price for 2 months. Okay. So, I mean, she's a way better negotiator than I am, by the way. So we go to Aruba, and I mean, like I said, couldn't have been better. It was my wife, my daughter, and I. I mean, Aruba was empty. We would get to go to the best restaurant on a Friday night, walk right up at 6:30, 7 o'clock for dinner with no reservations. I mean, I don't think I could go back, quite frankly. So things are good. But then my inflection point happened. So for a few months, my dad had been struggling with this virus or this disease that doctors just couldn't figure out. And he was going downhill, but he's one of those guys from the generation that, thinks he can fix it himself and screw doctors and stuff like that. And I knew if I had gone home too early to try to help him that it wouldn't have gone well. And so I was really just waiting for my mom to tell me, like, when's the right time here. And when I'm in Aruba, I got the phone call, and my mom says, he's not doing well. You need to come home. And I remember vividly, I hung up the phone. I called up my team. I said, hey, cancel everything. I'm going to go. I got to go take care of my dad and my family. And now, mind you, we had just signed one of our biggest customers, and I was training them personally. I was training about 300 or 400 of their sales professionals all around the world remotely. And I was doing stuff starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, going all the way to 9 o'clock at night, and scheduled out for about 3, 4 weeks in a row. And this was a huge contract for us. But when I got that call from my mom, hung up, told my team, cancel everything, give the client their money back. I don't care. And I don't know when I'm going to be back, quite frankly. And so I went home. And so I, kissed my wife and my daughter and jumped on a plane and went to hang out and see my dad and my mom and my sister. And, thankfully when I got there, he was still alive, but he was in the ICU. And the nurse, God bless her. By the way, if you're a nurse out there, if you know somebody who is a nurse, please give them a hug for me. They are absolute angels. This nurse actually allowed me and my mom and my sister up to see my dad, even in COVID times when we were absolutely not allowed to. But she knew how serious the issue was. And so we got to see him. And quite frankly, if I didn't see my dad before he passed away, I don't quite know where I'd be right now, because I hadn't seen him over a year and a half because of COVID. And I at least got to say goodbye, which was great. And so after that, I stayed with my mom and my sister and try to help my mom deal with, how do you deal with losing your partner for 55 years, right? So got the house in order, some of the finances, those type of things, and spent, I don't know, probably 4 weeks or so. And after I felt like she was in okay shape, obviously can't be in great shape there, I ended up headed back to Aruba to go deal with my own grief and see my family again. And when I went back, there was a lot of walking on the beaches, sitting at the end of piers, talking into space, to the universe, to my dad. Hopefully he was listening. And a lot of soul searching. And, then I decided after a while I was ready to plug back into work. And so I did. And the thing is that when I plugged back into work, it was interesting because everything was running like a drum. I mean, clients were happy, revenue was there, employees were they were just doing incredible work. And I mean, I don't think we even lost, I think we maybe lost like $5,000 worth of revenue for a keynote that I couldn't have done. And it was amazing to me. So, I mean, for every entrepreneur out there, I mean, that's a dream come true, right? You start a company that doesn't need you. Now, the challenge with that, though, is it kind of put me in a weird weird spot, because that's kind of who I was for years, right? I mean, I was a guy. My main goal was to go out there and drive as much revenue as I possibly could to keep this engine going. And now it didn't look like I needed to be that guy anymore, which again is great, but it threw me for a loop, because a lot of my self-worth was tied to being the guy, being the one driving that revenue. And so now I didn't really know where I fit anymore. And so with my dad passing away and me not knowing where I fit in the business, 2021 was a pretty challenging year. It was probably the most challenging year I've ever had in my life. And I'm not saying I was lost, but I was definitely searching, all right, about where I fit. And when I tell you it got worse, it got worse. I mean, just shit like, I had kidney stones. Like, are you kidding me? If you've had kidney stones, holy shit, I don't wish those on my worst enemy. That was the worst pain I think I've ever been through in my life. So I got hit by kidney stones. Like, my cousin died unexpectedly, which was just crazy. My mom had surgery. I mean, the macroeconomic stuff that was happening, it was just so brutal. And so, getting through that year, I felt pretty proud of getting through that year, just, still standing. And in 2022, my daughter has a 2-week vacation. Okay. So she has a 2-week vacation. Instead of a week in February and a week in March, we get 2 weeks. I'm sorry, February and a week in May. She gets 2 weeks in March. And so we always try to take a 2-week vacation. And this year we had set it up where we were going to the Amazon jungle. And this was, my wife's an environmental scientist, and, the Amazon jungle is obviously the lungs of the planet. And so we thought it'd be a great opportunity. Now, I don't think any of us knew what we were getting ourselves into here, because when I tell you we were in the Amazon jungle, I mean, we were in the Amazon jungle. We took a flight to Ecuador, and then another little puddle jumper to another section of Ecuador, and then an hour drive to the Amazon River. And then we got into a motorized canoe, to take a 2-hour drive up the Amazon, where you didn't see a single soul or building that was even within view. And then we got to this drop-off place, and we got in a non-motorized canoe for another 2-hour trip up this windy river. literally into the middle of the Amazon, and we saw some shit that, I mean, you just see in movies. I mean, anacondas. I mean, we walked by, you could literally touch it. It was about a 20-foot anaconda and probably about 150 to 200 pounds just sitting there. Obviously, it had just eaten something huge. So thankfully, it wasn't very active. But we saw that. We saw monkeys. We saw river otters that are huge, apparently. It was bananas. But one of the things that really struck me and my family was when we were taking some hikes. And this one hike specifically, we were walking down. And you know when a tree falls and in the middle of a trail or something like that, and they use the chainsaw to cut it in half to clear the path, right? Well, there was a bunch of that. And if you looked at the trunks, they looked weird. And my wife, my daughter, and I all picked up on this. And so finally, I asked our guide, I was like, hey, Remy, I got to ask you here, like these tree trunks, what's going on with them? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I go, there's no rings in these tree trunks. So they had no rings in them, right? And it just looked weird. It was just this matte, flat thing on a tree that I'd never really seen. And he's like, well, and his answer was, well, we're on the equator. I was like, so? He goes, well, we don't have seasons here on the equator. So the trees continuously grow, which is why they don't have rings. And it was like one of those light bulbs that went off, and it was like almost like a dull light bulb, right? Like, holy shit. I never even thought about why trees had rings. Right? But if you think about it, they grow for a season, they stop. They grow for another season, they stop. And that's why they have rings. And on the equator, because there's no season, they never stop growing. So for the rest of the walk, I had that sitting in my head trying to figure that thing out, because it was like a huge light bulb went off. And then we ended up going to the top of this tree that is one of the tallest trees in the Amazon. It has a nice little perch on top, and you can look out over the entire Amazon jungle. And again, there is not a human structure in sight when you're up there. And so I'm up on this thing, and I got that rattling around in my head, plus all the other stuff that I was going through. And it struck me like a ton of bricks that I had stopped growing. I had spent a year in neutral. And so as that dawned on me, it actually gave me a lot of hope, because I mean, I have 12 personal guidelines to success. And one of them is 1% better every day. You got to be growing, right? You got to be doing 1% better every day. You don't have to, go crazy about self-improvement, but you got to be able to look at yourself at the end of the day and say, hey, am I better today than I was yesterday? And that is something that was core to me, but apparently I had forgotten. So after I got back from that trip, I became obsessed with trying to figure out how to get moving again here. And so I started re-listening to a lot of the podcast episodes with executives from companies who are really succeeding through COVID, and interviewing new ones with a new focus. And talking to a ton of my clients who I could tell were doing really, really well, and seeing what was working for them. I even looked at my own company and figured out, okay, how did we get through this, and how did we do so well through that transition? So after all those interviews and collecting my notes, I looked at them, and there was 3 main characteristics that really stood out to me. And like I said earlier, they were alignment, execution, and gratitude. And I want to unpack each one of those with you right now, just to give you some perspective and maybe some examples as well. So from a business standpoint, right, I looked at these companies who are really doing well through this transition and through all these challenging times. And it was pretty clear to me that they were crystal clear and they lived their why. Like, for instance, companies like Salesforce.com or Patagonia, Salesforce has this 1-1-1 philosophy, and Patagonia is obviously, all about the environment. And they stopped for a while trying to sell stuff, and they really leaned into helping their community and elevating other people. And so I looked at that, and from our standpoint, from a business, I had mentioned, at JB Sales, our why is to elevate the people and profession of sales so it's accessible to anybody willing to put in the work. And when we realized that, we knew that when COVID hit, that, the sales community was in a lot of trouble. I mean, there was a lot of reps who just went home and they were working out of their houses and freaking out, quite frankly. And they needed to hear something other than their manager keep continuing to tell them to work hard. So I told the team, take off your training hats and put your motivational hats on and go out there and do what we could to help other people, really get through this. And look, if they could pay us, fantastic. If they couldn't, just give away that time to give them some type of hope. And so that why really drove us as an organization. Then we looked at values too. Again, core values, you look at companies that really lived their core values, and not only did their employees stay aligned with them, but their customers did too. And for us, our values were family first. I had mentioned that earlier. And so instead of going for, revenue targets or profitability at the time, we changed everything from a priority standpoint and looked to see, okay, how can we make sure that everybody can feed their families, right? How can we make sure that we can retain all of our employees and make it so that they can pay their bills? And so we worked as an organization, we flattened everything out and we worked together to get through this. So the values are huge for us. And then the other piece was, priorities, obviously. I kind of mentioned not going for revenue now, but making a family. Like, we had to reset on our priorities and realign what our goals were, because we were built for growth the year before. And now it was totally different. So we now had to be much more specific with what we were doing on a daily and weekly and monthly basis as an organization. So as I looked at all these why and values and goals, I decided, you know what? It's been a while since I personally went through that exercise for myself. I mean, I have these 12 guidelines to success that I did, I think it was back, probably at Thrive Networks, that first company we started. I had read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And I think somewhere in there it talked about writing down your values or your principles. And so I did it. And it was something that I lived by, but I didn't really focus on. I just kind of knew they were internal to me. So I ended up going back and getting a business coach and working through my why and resetting my values. I don't think my values have ever changed, but they definitely reprioritized. So for instance, my why ended up, and this is after some work, and I can, by the way, if you want to email me, I can send you the worksheets that I used to do this, but ultimately, my why ended up being to share my privilege, influence, and earned experience with family, friends, and employees, and anyone who genuinely gives a shit, so they can achieve a level of freedom and happiness that allows them to live the life that they want. Look, I understand I am a very privileged person, and privilege, I mean, for those of you who know me, I have it actually tattooed on my arm. When my dad passed away, he had this little note on his desk, and it said, and it was in his handwriting, it said, "When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression." And I thought that was so powerful that I had it tattooed on my arm, as a matter of fact. Because look, privilege is not, waking up with a silver spoon in your mouth or getting handed anything. Privilege is the fact that when I wake up in the morning, as a white male here, I don't have to worry about what I'm wearing so I don't get sexually harassed. Or when I get pulled over by the police, I don't even think about it. Hey, officer, what's up? And I don't have to worry about, being killed or any of that stuff. That's what privilege is. The stuff that you don't even know that you have an advantage over other people. And so I wanted to share that privilege and how to help elevate as many other people as I could with it. And so that why was core to me. And then I looked at the values and went through the value exercise. And man, if you have not been through this value exercise recently, I highly recommend you go through it. Yeah, it couldn't have helped me more from a clarity standpoint. And I'll give you an example. The way the value thing works is usually about 50 or 60 values on a piece of paper, right? And if you go through the exercise, you got to choose the ones that most resonate with you. And you get it down to probably 20 that you like, and then you go from 20 to 5, right? The 5 core ones, and then you force rank them, what's most important, what's least important. And so when we got to that list with my business coach, family was on the list and made the top 5. And when we were prioritizing them, I said, well, isn't family kind of the default number one? And he's like, no, absolutely not. He goes, if you want family to be the top priority for you, then you have to write it down and you have to live it. And you have to ask yourself every single day, how is it, or every single decision you make, how is this going to impact my family? And when he said that to me, it again hit me like a ton of bricks here. I had realized that, when I was a weekend dad earlier, right, flying all around this world, I was saying that I was doing it for family, right? So we could live the life that we wanted to, and my daughter could have all the opportunities, and my wife could be whatever, right? And that's why I was doing this. But if I really sat down and thought about it for more than a few minutes, I would realize that I was not doing that for my family. I mean, my family was benefiting in some ways from that. But the reason I was doing that is flying all over the world, being the guy doing the trainings and stuff like that. It's because I was really fucking good at it. And that's why. I mean, there's just something about, flying all over the world and, telling people I went to Singapore for a day and, Australia for a day. And as ridiculous as that sounds, it's like, ooh, right? And or standing up in front of 3, 4, 500 people and giving a presentation and having people come back saying, oh, that was awesome. I mean, there's just there's just something about that, obviously, right? And so I wasn't doing it for my family. I was doing it for me. And so now with this reset on values, putting family as number one, literally every single decision I make now, I have to ask myself, how is this going to impact my family? And it's given me far more clarity than I've ever had before with the decisions I make. And then the other thing about alignment that I started personally exploring, I mean, we talked about priorities, right? So I had to reset my priorities and my goals, which I think you should be doing constantly. But the one thing I started learning more about was actually energy management. Now, energy management, for the most part, is when people talk about it, is when you do things throughout the day, right? So in the mornings, you have energy to do certain things and, whatever. I thought about it a little bit more as what gives me energy and what takes energy away from me. And so I created this little matrix where on the x-axis is a priority, right? Priority. So on the upper end is helps you achieve your goals and priorities, and on the lower end does not help you achieve your goals and priorities. And on the y-axis was gives me energy and takes energy away. And so with those 4 quadrants, what I started to do was put everything that I do, all the tasks, all the people, all the everything that I do in one of those boxes. And I mean everything, right? So people, friends, family, you name it. It was pretty evident to me that all the stuff that I put in the box that helped me achieve my goals and gave me energy, those were the things that I just loved to do. And so with this matrix, what you do is you put everything in those boxes, and the stuff that's in the helps me achieve my goals and gives me energy, you literally do that as much as you possibly can, okay? Now, the stuff that does helps you achieve your goals but does not give you energy, in that quadrant right there, that's stuff you have to do, but you might not like doing it. So for me, it's stuff like finance and administrative things, those type of things. I know they're important, but I just don't like doing it. So you either eat the frog, some will say, which is you kind of do it, section it off, do it the first thing in the day, get it out of the way, or, be hyper-focused on doing that thing so you can be efficient with doing it once a week or once a day, or you outsource it to somebody else, okay? Now, the stuff that gives you energy but does not help you achieve your goals, that's important. Those are stuff like, hobbies, and, for me, it'd be like travel and, a few other things. Now, I could argue some of these help me achieve my goals, but fundamentally, they were things that I like to do, but don't necessarily have a direct tie. And those are important. Like I said, you got to keep those in there for sanity's sake. But if you want time back, mental time and physical time back, everything that you put in the box that takes energy away from me and does not help me achieve my goals, literally put it in that box, cut it off, and throw it away. And I mean this, and do it as soon as possible. And it sucks because it has to do with friends, family, all the different things that we do. For me, it'd be like gambling and drugs or whatever else, those things that I might have been doing because I felt like, oh, these were cool. I looked at them and said, no, they're not in any way, shape, or form, and I need to stop doing them. And so that, for me now, being fully aligned on my why, my values, my priorities, and my energy, let me get to that next level of execution. So the next pillar and characteristic that I found of people and companies who were surviving and thriving and continuously growing was that they were executing. They didn't stand still. I remember when, COVID first hit, you had some people say, well, I can't wait till this goes back to normal, right? And I would look at them and be like, first of all, what is normal? And second of all, if you are waiting for anything to get back to anything, I think you're already lost. Like, it was the companies who kept executing and didn't hesitate to move forward that were succeeding. I mean, again, there's plenty of examples like this. Remember the distilleries who would, it's vodka or whatever it was that they had distilleries in, and they immediately flipped and started creating hand sanitizer so they could fill, first of all, drive revenue for themselves, but also help out the communities. It was amazing to see how much innovation happened in such a short period of time. I have a boxing gym right behind my house. This guy, Brandon, and Brandon, if you're listening, man, keep fighting, brother. Obviously nobody was going into gyms. So you know what he did? He took his Jeep and he retrofitted his Jeep with a big boxing punching bag, and he drove it around to all of his members' houses, personal houses, and would do workouts in the in the driveway with us. And so my wife, my daughter, and I are out there doing push-ups and sit-ups and burpees and everything else, and he made it happen. It was unbelievable. And, looking at us at JB Sales, we didn't stop either. Like, again, we didn't have the choice to stop because we couldn't deliver on site. So we pivoted immediately to remote training. Now, we had been delivering remote training for a while, but nobody wanted it, right? Kind of everybody was like, well, the on-site stuff's better, whatever. So thankfully we were structured to do it. And so we restructured the way that we delivered our training and how we delivered it, and made it much more digestible for people and fun, because we were able to do exercises and team-oriented type of things and spread it out over the course of a couple of weeks. We also started, we had just gone into studio in December before COVID hit, and recut all of our content, right, for our online catalog that we were producing. And we came out with our version of Netflix for Sales in April, when everybody had gone home, and with a lot of our content being focused on prospecting when everybody's pipeline was empty. Obviously there was something there for people that could use to help execute. And so we just started executing. We treated everything as an experiment. And this is one of the things I'm going to really recommend you all think about right now. Strategy is hard to come by right now with how much things are changing and how fast they are changing. So here at JB Sales, we look at everything as an experiment. And I encourage you to do the same, right? Come up with a hypothesis. Obviously, you got to know your goals and priorities and stuff, but come up with a hypothesis of how you can get something, right? Get results based on some goal that you're trying to achieve, and put a beginning to an end to it, maybe a little budget, and then go. And who cares if you fail? As long as you're learning from it and you fail fast, you have to keep executing. And so you'll hear me talk a lot in my trainings and everything about A/B split testing, right? So that you can figure out what's working and what's not. And that's a huge theme moving forward, because the companies who are agile, those are the ones that are going to succeed. The companies who are stuck in their ways, and the people who are stuck in their ways, they're going to be the ones that get smoked. And so, again, I looked at myself with that knowledge of execution, seeing these companies execute and survive and thrive because of it. Again, I had been stuck in neutral for a year because I really wasn't doing anything. And so I started experimenting, going back to that quadrant of what I love to do and what gives me energy, and also what helps me achieve my goals. I started formulating different ways that I could deliver content that aligned with that. I started working on special projects to move the needle and to drive revenue and to enjoy myself again when it came to this profession. And I started to enjoy it again. And so I started executing, I started moving. And did all that stuff work? No, absolutely. I mean, I did this executive workshop idea that I thought was fantastic, where, 10 people, Napa Valley, had it all set up. And, at the end of the day, decided it was more of a distraction than anything else, and dumped it, even after putting some money into it. But I learned a lot. And then I tried something new. So I kept moving, and I felt better, the fact that I was doing something and not just sitting in neutral. And then the last piece that really stuck out for me as a characteristics of companies and people that were getting through and continuously growing was gratitude. Again, let's go back to Salesforce. They have the 1-1-1, right? They went back out into the community. And for those of you who don't know the 1-1-1 philosophy for Salesforce, it was, 1% they give 1% of time, 1% of product, and 1% of profits. And so they went back and they really, gave back to the community and started helping out and giving to charities. There was other people, I'll use Brandon from my gym behind my house. He's really good at making things. And so he was giving away goggles and eyewear and maskwear as, to help everybody. And everybody, the gratitude that he gave and received was overwhelming for what he was doing. And for us at JB Sales, there was a very tangible example of how gratitude saved me personally and also a part of our business. And it was, I told you, all the trainings were canceled, right? So APAC, EMEA, and US. And there was the last training that I was scheduled to go deliver. I was on a plane from Boston to Chicago. And I remember I had just gotten on this plane, and this was $30,000. So this was $30,000. And at that time, $30,000 meant everything to me and to the business, because I didn't know where we were going to get money. And so as I'm sitting down on the plane, I get this text message, and I didn't have the number in my phone, so I didn't know who it was, but it said, "Hey, John, are you still in Boston?" And I knew it immediately. I was like, "VK, is this you?" I was like, "Are you canceling the session tomorrow?" He's like, "Yeah, man, I'm super sorry. Like, I thought we were going to be able to do it, but it's just not going to happen. So I was like, shit. Right. So I remember just running off the plane. I barely made it off. They were closing the door. And I called him and he said, dude, I am so sorry. I go, I get it, man. Look, everybody's canceling. It just sucks. I mean, who knows what the hell's going to happen here? He goes, hey, but do me a favor and send me the invoice. And I was like, BK, I'm like, what do you mean send you the invoice, man? Like, I don't know when I'm going to be able to deliver for you. I'm like, do you want remote training? He's like, nope, I want on site. But send me the invoice anyways. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable sending you an invoice for something I don't even know if I'm going to be able to deliver for you. And he goes, John, look, we're a VC-backed company here. We're in okay shape. I know you're a self-funded business, and I know cash is everything to you right now. So send me the invoice. Now, at a time when other companies were slow rolling and slow paying vendors who had already delivered whatever the product or service was, and they were screwing people so that they could make, in that world. And by the way, there was plenty of clients that did that. And I remember them, and vendors who did it as well. But for somebody like VK to sign a check for 30 grand when there was nothing I could deliver for him, gratitude. I mean, I've realized, in the past, I've been really good at giving gratitude, saying thank you. I think my mom raised me right. And, saying thank you all the time. But I've been pretty terrible, if I really reflect on it, about receiving gratitude. Usually when somebody thanks me for something, I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal, right? And I've realized that actually is not a good thing for anybody, right? Because it deprives you of the joy of that person coming to you and saying thank you. But it also deprives them of the joy of giving you that thanks, because for them to go out of their way and say thank you, that took something. And for you to say, oh, for me to be like, oh, don't worry about it, that either tells them, A, what I did for them really wasn't that important, so they could probably just, who cares in the future, or that it didn't matter that much. And so now, I couldn't tell you how grateful I am for VK. And again, VK, if you are listening to this, brother, thank you. You will always, always be somebody that I will hold at the highest level and do anything for, no matter what. And thank you. And so that gratitude, and I remembered that vividly. Now, again, let's apply it to myself and the challenges that I was going through because I was stuck in neutral. Well, guess what? When my dad had passed, and I had gone back to Aruba, and I was, like I said, taking long walks on beaches, sitting on piers and staring at sunsets and stuff. I vividly remember sitting at the Airbnb, and I was looking over the sunset, just contemplating life. And I get this phone call, and it's from this kid, Kevin, who I used to work with. So back at my first company, Thrive, that we sold to Staples, it was me and probably 20 or 30 engineers at a time. And then we finally decided to hire some new reps, and we were only supposed to hire one, right? So we were only supposed to hire one rep that was going to back me up and do some calling for us and whatever. But there was two candidates that we really liked. Now, one of them was Jonathan and one of them was Kevin. And my CEO and my director of biz dev really loved this kid, Jonathan, because he was, top of his class. He had all the accolades and everything else. But I like this kid, Kevin. He was a little rough around the edges, but there was just something about him that I was like, I like this kid. So I ended up fighting for him and told, CEO and my director of biz dev, hey, look, why don't we hire both of them? And I'll treat them exactly the same. And look, if they both work out, fantastic. But if they don't, we'll keep one of them. And, within a month, we'll probably let one of the other ones go. And so they agreed. And, I treated them both exactly the same. And Kevin did everything I asked him to do, right? Put his head down, made the dials, did the activities, you name it, right? Whereas Jonathan, he did some of it, but not as much. And so, unfortunately for Jonathan, we ended up letting him go, and I kept Kevin. Now, fast forward, I ended up, we get acquired by Staples, and I got fired, again, offered another position. And guess who took over as VP of Sales? Well, Kevin did. Well, Kevin had stayed at Thrive for quite a while, and I hadn't talked to him must have been at least a year. I hadn't talked to him. And all of a sudden I get this phone call in probably one of my darkest hours. This is where the universe is really messed up and good in a lot of ways, because I get this phone call and every bone in my body said, don't answer it. I don't want to talk to anybody right now. But for some reason I just picked it up and I said, hey, what's going on, man? And he goes, John, hey, bud. He's like, hey, I just want to say thank you. And I was like, well, for what? And he goes, well, you know how you fought for me to come on board at Thrive? I was like, yeah. Well, he's like, well, and you know how I took over VP of sales after you left? I was like, yeah. He goes, well, Thrive is, Staples sold it to a private equity, and then private equity has kind of consolidated a few other businesses, and we recapitalized a few times, and I've stayed on board, and we just did again. And I just want to let you know that I'm a multimillionaire now, and my family never has to worry about money ever again in their lives. And I just wanted to say thank you. He had no idea how much I needed that at that moment. I mean, just a wave of gratitude flowed over me at that moment. And I don't know how to describe it. I really don't. It saved me, though. It saved me from a very dark place. And so now, and Kevin, by the way, if you're listening, brother, again, thank you. Thank you for that message. So anyways, now, gratitude. I mean, I got my gratitude journal every day, and it saved me. I keep a folder in my inbox of every email, every message that I get on Instagram of people saying thank you for any reason whatsoever. And when I'm going through bad times or tough times, I just open up that folder and I read them and realize that this is why you do it. This is why you move forward. And I've gotten a lot better at receiving gratitude, not just giving it, but receiving it. So now when somebody says thank you, I stop and I just say you're welcome. Which is what leads me to finish this up and wrap this whole thing up with all of you. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for all your support. I can't tell you how much it means to me, the feedback that I get and, the emails that I get from you, and also just looking at the growth of this podcast alone. I could not do this without people who give a shit. And so if you're going through tough times right now and you're stuck in neutral or even going backwards, unfortunately, I highly recommend you take some of the learnings that I've learned over these past few years and apply them. And go get a coach or just Google how to do your why, or listen to Simon Sinek's audiobook, or read his book on why, and create your own. And then go through that value exercise and make sure that you are crystal clear on what your core values are. Because once you know what those core values are, you can start to look for opportunities and people that align with them. And I will tell you right now, life is a lot better when you surround yourself with people who share your core values and work at companies who share your core values. And then focus on your energy, right? Think about what gives you energy and what takes energy away from you. And just and align the stuff that gives you energy and helps you achieve your goals, and just avoid everything that doesn't. And then just execute and treat everything like an experiment. Test and try different things out. Learn along the way. Don't be scared of the new technology. Learn how to leverage it, because you will get replaced if you're just going through the motions. But if you learn how to leverage it, you could be indispensable. And you could think about a whole different version of you and your career and where you can take things if you just decide to try things out and don't be scared. And last but not least, please practice gratitude. I mean, even at the end of this, just go say thank you to somebody that you haven't said thank you to in a long time for any reason. And make sure that when you receive gratitude, you let it sit and you let that person know how much you appreciated them coming to you and saying thank you. So with that, moving forward here, I'm going to be trying to share my journey even more and leveling up here, because things are not getting less crazy, okay? And I really do believe that we can get through this together if we are aligned, if we execute, and if we have gratitude and just treat each other with some type of humanity here, and also work our asses off. So do me a favor and give me the feedback. Let me know what you thought of this conversation. Again, my email is john@jbarrows.com, and I would love to hear what you got from this, or any ways that I could potentially improve this to get the message out to the people that need to hear it. And like I've been saying in the intro here, I'm coming out strong again. I've always been selling, but now I'm back to hardcore sales, because it is a challenging environment right now, more than I've ever seen. And anybody who, has sold in the past 10 years and is not selling right now, it's a different world. And so I'm going to be sharing my journey and what I'm doing to sell through this, and hopefully getting you some of the tips, tools, and techniques that are working for me so that you can execute as well. So check out my new website. It's John M. Barrows. So JOHN M as in Michael, BARROWS.com. And let me know what you think. There's tons of free content on there. And there's other ways to get engaged. I've never done one-on-one coaching before, but I'm putting it out there now. I will be doing one-on-one coaching, and individual members can get access to all of our content live and recorded, as well as companies, obviously, working directly with companies who are looking to level up. So take a look, give me some feedback, and let me know what y'all think, all right? And thanks again for listening. And like I always say at the end of all my episodes here, go out there and make somebody smile today. Because no matter how bad you think your day's going or how bad you think it went, if you can make somebody smile, you know you had a good day. And the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you on the other side.